Welcome to another coffee break here at Firm Learning. My name is Heinrich. I'm a former McKinsey consultant, and in today's video, I will react to a very interesting video of another ex-former McKinsey consultant who actually got fired from McKinsey, who lost the job at McKinsey. And I will look at it, one of you send it to me, and I will provide my humble commentary on what happened, what the lady describes that happened to her at the firm, hopefully also sharing some good insights for you if you are about to start your consulting career as well. The video already got over 400,000 views, so quite well received. So let's get going.
This is not clickbait. I was fired by McKinsey after just 6 months as a consultant, and in this video I want to share how this happened, because I don't just want to talk about the successes on this channel, and I also don't think this topic is talked about enough. So let's start with how it happened, then dive into the reasons why, and finally how I reacted to getting fired and what that means for me now. In February this year, I started working for McKinsey as an operations specialist, which is basically a management consultant who is specialized in optimizing business processes. I got this job for a large part because of my experience as an engineer in the battery industry, which is a fast-growing industry, and so there are a lot of clients who want consulting in that industry. So I was under the impression that I was needed by the firm and that I would work primarily within the battery industry. That didn't happen.
So the lady, by the way, is called Anna Reich. I will leave a link to her channel in the video description, so feel free to check out her content as well. She describes that she joined the firm as an engineer, right? So someone without a business background, and then hoped to do projects in battery technology. And that's fair, and I trust there are some projects like that going on. At the same time, you need to realize if you're interested in such a rather niche, very specific topic, it might not always be possible for you to then directly get staffed on projects like that. Often it takes a little bit of time to do the networking, to get to know the partners that actually work in that domain, to then be able to really do work in this area as well.
I had a large automotive project for the first 3 months. Then I had 2 shorter projects in the pharmaceutical industry. And then I spent a lot of time what is called on the beach, which means that you don't have a project, there's no client paying for you, so you support the firm internally in some way. Now, the way most consulting firms work is that you're expected to network within the company.
So that's, I trust, an interesting concept that she's talking about here as well. The idea of being on the beach, or some companies also call it on the bench. And the idea is that if you're not staffed, of course, you're not on a project, right? And so then in the meantime, while you're waiting for your new project to start, essentially you are asked to do some internal support, maybe support with proposals, some other internal initiatives. Though actually the concept of on the beach, not sure if she intends it exactly like this, is that even that you do not do, so that you actually have free time, because there's not enough work internally and there are other consultants already doing that, so that literally you don't have anything to do, right? So you're supposed to be on call, so if anything happens that you are ready, but you are not staffed, essentially sitting at home, expected to react if needed, but there's no clear obligation here. And this especially happens to very junior consultants who just started out as this lady, because early on you don't have a lot of experience, so this can be then sometimes a bit challenging to get staffed, especially if the economic situation is not great. Maybe there's an economic downturn, not that many projects going on, and then typically there's also only a limited amount of internal work that you can do, and then you can find yourself on the beach indeed. This happened to me as well. In my first months, I was on the beach for about 1 week. It sounds like this lady was on the beach for significantly longer than that. Typically, if the business is going well, if there are lots of projects, it's a good economic situation, this is not really a problem. But we will later understand why this might indeed have been then a problem for here after all.
And find your own projects. So you're basically constantly applying for projects to take you on. You don't have a manager who assigns you work. You should find your own work. It's basically a big marketplace within a consulting firm. But I was told that this wasn't expected of me in the beginning. For the first 6 to 12 months, I would get a lot of support in finding projects, since I obviously don't have a network yet. But after my first project, I really had trouble finding more projects who were willing to take me on. Most of them said they were looking for someone with more experience. And the person who was responsible for helping me get projects also didn't succeed. But she said that this is normal since I'm new and that it's not a big deal. So other than the 2 shorter pharmaceutical projects. I didn't do any more projects for the remaining time, but I thought that was fine. At this point, it was also summertime, which is when there's a big dip in projects because a lot of clients are on vacation.
So this is now what she's describing, where essentially she did not get staffed indeed for a longer period of time. So what she calls being on the beach. And typically she is right. Typically in most firms, there are people who help you out to get staffed, especially early on when you do not have your own network, right? But essentially rely on someone giving you a hand and then getting you staffed. So the problem likely that existed is that she joined, now the video is already almost a year old, in a phase of economic downturn where likely there weren't that many projects going on. And then the staffer really struggled to find a project that would accept her. Because indeed, as she described, staffing in most of these big firms is essentially a marketplace, right? So there are consultants who want to start projects, but then there are the project leads, the partners, that are looking for junior consultants to get on their projects. And of course, every partner has the interest to get the best people on their projects because this then has the highest chance for the project to succeed. And especially if you are very junior, not that experienced, and maybe now, of course, I do not know, maybe you also did not receive the most stellar evaluations after the very first project, which is of course also somewhat natural as you're just starting out. It might be then challenging for you to find this new project. And then you are in this difficult situation that over an extended period of time, you're not being staffed, which in itself is then a problem because as soon as your tenure advances, as soon as, let's say, you hit 6 months of tenure, you are expected to be able to do certain things as a consultant. But if you have not been on a project, you didn't really have the chance to even learn these skills, which indeed can put you in a very difficult situation. And this is likely the situation that this lady faced here as well.
Now, I had 2 performance reviews within the first 6 months. The first one was after 3 months, and I was basically told that I'm really solid in terms of my industry knowledge and that I also have lots of things to work on, especially regarding my consulting skills, but that this is normal feedback to receive at this time. So I thought that I was on the right track. And then the second performance review took place right before my 6 months probation period was over. And the way a performance review works is that a neutral person you haven't worked with talks to everyone that you have worked with, and then they present that feedback to a committee of people who have never met you. And then that committee decides how they would rate your performance and whether you get to stay. So I knew that this was going on, but I didn't know exactly on what day that would take place or when I would find out. And I also got the impression that this was more of a formality, nothing to worry about. Until it was Friday afternoon and I suddenly got
So let's maybe pause here, right? And what she described about these performance processes is indeed very typical. These are how performance reviews are taking place indeed. And given now that we know how this ends, let's also reflect on how big consulting firms, I trust this is very common for all the big firms, do their performance evaluations, right? Also linked to the economic situation that the firm is faced in. Because as you know, it typically takes a certain level of performance review to be able to continue to work for the firm, right? To be able to be designated, to advance to the next level. And in these big firms, there's this principle that many people like to call up or out. Or another expression is grow or go. Yeah, grow or go. Where the idea is that indeed either you are able to advance and move up, yeah, and be promoted and get these positive reviews, or if this is not the case, you are asked to leave the firm, which of course can be quite uncomfortable. And I'm of course very empathetic also with this lady, because now what likely happened is that what she described, even though likely she didn't get maybe the very best reviews from her first project, given that she said she also got corresponding feedback, in a normal situation, in a normal economic situation, very likely this would not have been a big issue. Of course, firms are very understanding that the first project might not be the project already where you can perform to your highest abilities. And then typically she would have just got staffed on the second and third project, and by that likely she will have gone through the learning curve that is just needed and required to get there. But this was not the case, and of course, especially if then the economy is not doing well, these consulting firms typically just increase the threshold, what ratings you need in order to be able to advance, to move to the new level. So people who would have been designated maybe a year ago now suddenly are not getting designated anymore and potentially even asked to leave. And of course, this is conjecture. I do not know the details, the insights of this, but I would at least assume that something like this happened then to this lady as well.
And I suddenly got this urgent meeting invite by the person who had presented my case to the committee, whom I had talked to once before, plus a random person from HR who I had never met. That's when I knew, because what's urgent about a performance review unless it has consequences? So I basically had 1 hour to worry about that, and I also asked some people for advice. I said, I think I'm about to get fired. What do I do? And I got the advice to ask a lot of questions to really understand the reasons. So the meeting finally started, and they got to the point within probably the first 30 seconds. They said, unfortunately, we've decided not to extend your contract past the probation period. You're released from work, effective immediately, and will get paid for, I think it was another 3 weeks. Although I expected this, it was still a huge shock.
Yeah, wow, that's of course a very difficult situation to be in, and of course I'm very sorry that she experienced it like this in this very way. What's important to understand now in terms of a learning for you. So a key concept, how many consulting firms evaluate how good a consultant is. To be fair, typically more for senior roles, right? But here this concept likely was applied as well, is the idea of utilization. Yeah, so essentially what share of your time, how many days, what percentage of the days you were actually staffed on a project. And I think she now continues to talk about that as well. So let's hear what she has to say regarding this idea.
And then they gave me the choice of whether I want to get into the reasons now or set up another call to talk about that later. Now, I was crying at this point, but I was like, no, you need to explain this to me now, which was very uncomfortable because I didn't even really know these people and I'm crying in front of them. But I also wasn't going to go into the weekend knowing that I got fired, but not knowing why. And what it came down to is that I didn't have enough projects and spent too much time on the beach. I didn't show enough development, in part because I didn't have enough projects to develop my skills. And I didn't have a sponsor among the people I worked with. Someone who said, I really want to keep Anna in the firm. So yeah, those are the reasons they told me they decided not to keep me. Now, that felt awful to hear.
And so this is indeed drawing on this concept of utilization. Yeah, so what share of your time are you actually being staffed? And this is like a key concept to understand also for your own consulting career. Of course, it's very unfair how this was now applied in her specific instance, given that indeed it was not up to her, right? That she didn't find these projects. I mean, you cannot really expect from someone just being in the firm for a few months, right, to do all this networking yourself. The underlying learning here is, right, if you want to advance, especially as soon as you get to the project lead rank, and even more if you then want to move into a junior partner role or a partner role, one of the key KPIs you are being evaluated on is your utilization. So what share of your days is booked on the project, on any project? Yeah? And the idea is that if you are a great consultant, if you're doing great work, people want to work with you. So they request you, the partners reach out to you if you're a project lead and ask you, hey, can you be the project lead for my new project? Or the partners are maybe being asked by other senior partners, hey, can you support my project as an expert? Because you have this deep content expertise in a certain area. Or of course, if you're then really a senior partner who is doing business acquisition him or herself, essentially you win the projects and then you own these projects, and then you can also decide how many days you charge on these projects yourself. So utilization is a key metric that essentially decides how much in demand the consultant is, how many people want to work with that consultant. And if this number drops to a low level, the implication, or what's then referred from that, is that essentially people don't want to work with you, that you are not adding enough value. And again, that's very unfair, of course, to be applied here in this very junior position. And typically in the first years, this utilization concept is not like the main KPI that the people look at. This rather starts later. But in this very specific case, this happened. This is what people looked at. And my humble advice to avoid these situations, if you are finding yourself in a position of a junior on the beach, you really should try everything possible to not extend this beach period to an unnecessarily long time. And I'm not saying this is always possible, and maybe she also did everything she could and still did not succeed. This can absolutely happen, and I'm very empathetic to that. But at least you should really network as much as possible, meet people in the office, reach out to them, ask for connections, show that you're like 200% dedicated and motivated to find someone who staffs you. Because this is indeed very important. This is what you want to get done. And again, not implying, not saying that this is something that this lady did not do, but just if you find yourself in the situation, this is at least the advice that I can share.
But I also was not satisfied with the reasons they gave me because it sort of came out of nowhere and I didn't really know what I could have done differently. Not because I think I did everything perfectly. I know there were things I was doing poorly, but I didn't get a lot of constructive feedback and especially no one showing me how to improve. But I was also more in a surviving instead of thriving state. I was busy trying to survive the lack of sleep, high workload, and insane levels of socializing as an introvert. I physically could not do more to also take PowerPoint and Excel courses on the weekends or volunteer to do extra work to show initiative. I was at my limit. And maybe that makes me a bad consultant, but I just don't believe that.
So I don't think that this makes her a bad consultant. For sure, you can also succeed in consulting as an introvert. I am an introvert myself, also worked with many partners who clearly were introverts as well. But indeed, what she describes, especially in her situation, this is what likely would have helped her, right? If she would have tried to network a little bit more, if this would have been possible, of course, for her. But I can also very much relate to the struggle. These are things that never came easy to me as well, being an introvert too. So I can see how this is a very difficult situation to be in, especially that likely these things weren't really explained to her, right? So the importance of utilization, likely this is not what you learn from the very start. These are concepts that then you pick up over time. So again, I do not think this is her fault whatsoever. This was likely very much driven by the overall economic situation that the company was in.
Yes, I didn't fit in at McKinsey. I agree with them on that. I just don't think that it says something negative about me. Yeah, let's leave it at that and talk about what happened next. I went through a wild mix of emotions.
So let's leave it at that indeed. And I think this last point that she made is a very important one that based on my humble life experience so far, I can very much agree with that as well. And this is the idea that in the end of the day, failure has no meaning. Yeah, so you might find yourself in countless situations where something doesn't go as planned, where maybe you don't get the promotion that you want to do. Indeed, you might get terminated from a job. You applied to university but didn't get that. And it's very easy to let this get to us, right? Where we feel like we are not good enough. We failed. We didn't deserve it. We are not smart enough, not intelligent enough, not diligent enough, not motivated enough. But in the end, failure has no meaning, right? These are just attributions that you yourself attribute to the fact that now you got terminated from this company. But in the end, beyond that, there's like no implication whatsoever that objectively is out there, just what you make this to be. And I hope she still got some value, some insights from this time in consulting, and I'm for sure wishing her the very best for her next steps. Shameless plug, one thing that we can learn from Anna's situation is that sometimes even the very first project you get staffed on can really matter to kick off your consulting career the right way. And this is potentially also about making sure you have at least basic or even intermediary PowerPoint skills, Excel skills, communication skills, and so on to directly make a good impression from the start. And if you want to improve in these areas as well, to prepare yourself the best way for your new consulting career, or if you're at the very beginning and want to make sure you get on that fast track to learn all these skills that are needed, this is exactly what we are covering in our Firm Learning Mentoring Program. If you're interested, there's a link in the video description for a free initial consultation where you can talk to me or another member of our team, where we will discuss your individual situation and discuss how we might be able to support you. I'd now be super interested what you have to say about what happened to this lady in the video. Feel free to leave a comment in the comment section, then we can have an open conversation around that. If you took any value from this video, please leave a like and subscribe to stay up to date on the content. Big thanks to all the channel members. My name is Heinrich and looking forward to meet all of you soon.